Hello and welcome to Further Inside Chor Leoni. My name is Erick Lights. I'm the artistic director of Chor Leoni Men's Choir in Vancouver, British Columbia. And joining me today is somebody that I've admired for many years, both as a person and his work. I'm really thrilled to have with us Grant Gershon. Hi, Grant.
Hey, Eric, nice to see you.
It's really nice to see you too. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Can you tell us give us a little bit of brief bio on yourself? How did you arrive to this very moment talking on
Uh,
the internet?
yeah, well, okay, I guess the first thing I might say is that I never in a million years thought that I was going to be a conductor. As I was growing up, I was a pianist. I loved to play, I loved to sing, but all through high school, college, and beyond, it was never even like in my wildest imagination. And frankly, I think part of that is because, I grew up like in the 70s. I graduated high school in 77, in an age that was very much about questioning authority. And, most of the conductors, now this is going to get me in trouble because
Here we
maybe
go.
somebody that I went to school with is, listening, but most of the people that I knew who wanted to be conductors were just such assholes. Can I say that?
You can.
Or just like there was a personality type,
I
and
totally understand.
and I just didn't see. I mean, it just was not on my radar at all. But as I say, I was a pianist, and I also loved to sing, and therefore I loved being in choirs, and I was accompanying choirs and singers and instrumentalists, and I got hired after college to join the music staff at LA Opera. And at that point, LA Opera was in its infancy. It was founded in 1986. I joined the music staff in
Wow.
1988, essentially as the only pianist on staff. So, like, the first thing I did was an uncut version of Così fan tutte, where in addition to playing, of course, all the rehearsals and everything, I also played all the harpsichord continuo, and just just trial by fire.
Hmm.
But just fell in love with the whole process. I have to say, the second opera that I worked on there was Whitacre, with Simon Rattle conducting, and there was another pianist who was supposed to be playing the show that they had flown in from London, and he bailed out like a week before production was going to start. So I basically had to learn Whitacre
Wozzeck,
in
yeah.
about a week at the piano. Um, but anyways, I really I kind of fell in love with opera and fell in love with the process, and I've always loved working with singers. I was a total choral nerd in high school and college. But as I started working in opera and doing that whole the répétiteur thing, which is the fancy name for rehearsal pianist in opera, it was interesting that
Oh, but it's so much more. There's a
I
lot of
know,
yeah.
right? Yeah, it's and that actually that it's the so much more that kind of like led into this thing because eventually the title changed at some point to assistant conductor, but it was the same job, which is basically do everything that needs to be done for music staff, whether it's playing rehearsals, whether it's playing in the orchestra, playing keyboards, whether it's coaching singers, coaching languages, which of course was a whole other thing that I like very quickly got up to speed on,
Hmm.
and then also conducting off stage, backstage ensembles, and then that led to conducting rehearsals, blah blah blah, and you kind of see where this is going.
Right.
Um, and so I was going to try to make this short, and I know it's going on and on, but so fast forward to 1992, and I was hired that summer to go to the Salzburg Festival and be the head coach pianist for a production of Messiaen's opera Saint François d'Assise. And this was with Peter Sellers directing and Esa-Pekka Salonen conducting. And it was the first time that I had worked with Esa-Pekka, who was then coming into Los Angeles to become the music director of the LA Philharmonic.
Right.
So we worked together that summer, really intensively for like a 10-week rehearsal process on this immense undertaking. It's like a 4-hour long opera, and it's just insane. so at the end of the summer, it was at the cast party after opening night, and Esa-Pekka kind of took me aside over a beer, and he said, "Well, have you ever thought about conducting?" And he said, "Because I think you have the personality to be a conductor." And I truly wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult, but I rolled with it because actually I had been at that point. I had started feeling frustrated in the behind the scenes role, and I loved recital work, and I loved kind of a ham
to be in those moments when they're really happening. Yeah.
So basically, Esa-Pekka became like my mentor after that, and he hired me at the LA Phil to be his assistant conductor, and so I was there in that role for 3 years. Had truly never stood in front of an orchestra in my life, and I'm assistant conductor of the LA Philharmonic with Esa-Pekka.
Wow.
Solomon. It's crazy, and it's something that I think would never happen today, because the whole system of young conductors apprenticing and kind of coming up, and also going through like really intensive degree programs wasn't as much of a thing 30 years ago. So anyways, it was trial by fire.
It was sort of a little bit more sorcerer to apprentice, I think Philip Burnell once said, "Eric, conducting is a dark art, and it is passed from sorcerer to apprentice." And I always thought that was a kind of a cool analogy.
He is spot on with that, right? Because the truth is, what you come to realize is there's no way to teach it. You can teach certain aspects, I remember Esa-Pekka saying, he could teach a monkey how to like make the moves and how to look good and all this stuff. He said, like, that's not what it is.
Right.
That's a thing. That's what the audience sees. That's what, translates the music. But that's like 5%, right, of what it really
Absolutely.
is. And so basically, after that, we moved to New York for a few years, and I was freelancing there. But when this position at the LA Master Chorale opened up, Paul Solomonovich, my predecessor, the amazing, revered guru of choral music, was retiring. And of course, they had a search going on, and it was suggested to me that I might throw my hat in the ring. And I thought, that just seems crazy,
right?
Because first off, to say that choral music was my first love, and as I said before, I was a choral nerd and a complete geek in high school and college, but I really hadn't been around choral music at that point for quite some time. But again, I was kind of encouraged to, be part of the search. Long story short, they hired me.
Yeah.
There were auditions, there were tons of interviews and everything else. So I started. This is my 20th season at the LA Master Chorale, which kind of blows my mind. So I started in 2001, and it's just been the most satisfying and deeply rewarding experience. I've grown so much with the group, and I think the organization has grown so much over the years as well.
That's been, I think, apparent to an outsider like me, who doesn't get to the LA area for the live concerts, but just following the projects, following the trajectory, following the sort of the sense of the soul of this group under your tutelage, when it had a very well-known, it's had some very well-known conductors over the years.
That's right. Roger Wagner,
Roger who?
Founder.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And this is kind of what I want to, with my next question, ask you about. You bring, I think, in your bio, you bring maybe a different set of experiences, skills, perspectives into this sort of traditional choral ensemble. But the question to me is, like, what are the values that matter to you and to your organization that are informing you on the what and the how you do it? And just as a background, I just think very much during these COVID times, it's those values that we've we better have developed are about the only things that we can really rely upon at this intense moment of the
Yeah.
world. So what are those things that inform the how and what you do, and maybe how do those values how do they do that?
Well, to me, it's first and foremost about communication. And I think that part of that emphasis for me kind of came from being in the opera world, being kind of in a theatrical background, and just being very, of course, very interested in poetry, very interested in text, and passionate about the sound of language as well, and how the respecting the integrity of of the language, of the poetry, of the liturgy, whatever it happens to be, that is communicated really directly. That there's, I try with the group and to get away from artifice, or just making beautiful sounds for the sake of beautiful sounds. Which is nice, but just in the end,
And
not
I
that
think a
interesting.
pitfall of choral music, maybe more than a lot of other areas of art, like beauty is sort of gets put up at this other pedestal in our field. I think maybe more than other spots. I don't know.
I think it's true actually,
Yeah.
and I think that's been shifting maybe over the last like 10 years or so, especially with the. I'm really it's a whole other subject, but I'm so inspired by the entrepreneurial
Yes.
spirit that's happening in choral music, particularly over the last 10 or 15 years. And so, all of these ensembles that have a very clear point of view. And I think are getting away from just this kind of universal, beautiful, cacophonous,
Yeah.
just like this note is beautiful. The next note is going to be beautiful. We're going to make this chord amazingly beautiful, and then wait till you hear the next chord. It's also really beautiful. Oh, and then here's another beautiful chord.
Well,
And
it becomes
you
a
know,
fetishizing, doesn't it? Of yeah, it becomes sort of its own fetish. These sounds,
yeah,
in
yeah,
my
yeah.
opinion, yeah,
So,
yeah.
so to me, it really is, and I think to all of our singers, it really is. It's about communication. It's also about trust, of course,
Hmm.
like building that, building the trust where you can take risks. You can take risks within your section. Each section can kind of take risks and allow those to inform what happens across the group. And it's the things that I know, Eric, that you develop over the years. This this sense of mutual respect uh, for your artists, and that they know that we're kind of all on a journey together, and that we're trying to get to deeper truths than just the notes on the page and this graphic
Right.
notation that we have. But really, like, why are we doing this with every concert that you do and every piece that you do? What really is the message? And it's not the message that was written 200 years ago and exists 200 years ago, right? I mean, it's so clear now,
Oh
with
my.
everything that's
Yes.
going on in the world, that everything that we do, whether it's from the Renaissance or from the 19th century, or if it's written yesterday, it has to speak in real terms, or else why do it? It's there's plenty of great recordings of Beethoven Missa Solemnis.
Mozart Requiem.
If you
Yeah.
can't
Exactly.
make it,
Yeah.
yeah, if you can't really make it speak to an audience now in a very direct way, and again, risk taking is a large part of that as well. Then, I mean, so that to me is the kind of the fundamental driver of everything that we do.
That's all very inspiring to hear, and that really resonates with me. As you're talking about, wanting to communicate and the sense of now, let's put a finer point on it. What maybe especially talking here in September of 2020, what are the important things that we ought to be saying? what are we doing a bad job in our field? What could we do better? Where could we be? Where should we be headed? Where are you headed?
Yeah, well, I think that finding ways to be much more representative of in the music that we perform, in the artists that we're working with the makeup of our ensembles. I mean, that's been one of the real takeaways from this summer, and the renewed awareness, certainly in the United States, of racial injustice, and the fact that the issues of society, they simply have to be what we're talking about as artists and as musicians. So specifically, you may know that in July we made a pledge with the LA Master Chorale that at least 50% of our music going forward will be from composers from traditionally underrepresented groups in classical music. And it's interesting because on the one hand, I don't know of any other kind of like large, one-stop shop kind of, performing arts organization, not a specialty organization,
Right.
but, one that really serves the entire range.
You have a huge
classical
range
music.
of what you do.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah.
That I don't know of any other that's made a pledge like this, that's kind of this aspirational. On the other hand, when you kind of flip it around, what are we really saying? We're saying that we're not going to program any more than 50% by people that look like me.
Yes,
Hooray!
when you do the numbers, it's actually preposterous, isn't it? Yes, yes.
So I mean, which says
Still,
a lot about
yeah.
I mean, it says a lot about classical music,
Right.
right? And so that's something that we have to be very intentional,
Yeah.
to my mind, about changing. One of the things that we talk about a lot is, first off, acknowledging, that there's been systemic bias in classical music over the world, and therefore systemic bias requires systemic solutions. And it's, for us, it was not enough to just say, yes, we will program more music of composers of color and female identifying composers. That just felt too squishy, and we wanted to be able to quantify it in some way, and so that people can hold us accountable.
Right.
And that we can think about both our short-term and our long-term strategizing and artistic planning with this in mind, so that it's really baked in going forward to everything we do. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, to me, what it means is we're simply making a commitment to be more interesting, to have more music that's just more exciting, and because it's because I mean the beautiful thing about choral music is we can embrace every tradition, every heritage, every aspect of what it is to be a human, because every civilization that I know of, every society that I know of, has group singing
They
as
sing.
part of as part of who we are. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, when you're an orchestra, I mean, we love orchestras, right? Not going to diss orchestras, but I will say that if you have an ensemble that has a bunch of violins, a bunch of cellos, a couple bassoons, and trumpets and oboes and flutes, it's hard to kind of be able to embrace every kind of music,
Right. And there can be some square pegs and round holes occasionally. Yeah.
So I'm really excited about just the commitment
truly fantastic.
to be more, again, just more representative.
Is COVID allowing you? I mean, that's a big statement to make. And
Wait, what was that word again? It started with a C.
Yeah, sorry, it's a swear word. I'm sorry. Oh, My
What is this? This thing of which you speak, I know not.
Yes, may I have some soap to put in my mouth, please? Yes. But this is the composer Erick Eschenwald is calling this the Formata season, and I kind of love that idea in the fact that it also is giving us a little bit of chance for people like you and me who are running to the next project, to be able to just take a breath and look a little bit differently without the conveyor belt of projects coming at us. Are you finding that this is giving you some room to readjust, be creative? Is that possibly a silver lining to the C word?
It is actually a silver lining, and it's something that I'm ready to acknowledge and embrace. I mean, it's weird because everybody is suffering so much,
right.
And all of the artists that we know are in. It's just, this is a really challenging time. But you hit the nail on the head when you said we're on this conveyor belt of the next rehearsal, the next performance, the next gig, and it can be really relentless. And so I definitely am finding that the one perk of the situation is the luxury to have a little bit of time to, and again, it's the time to just think about, well, who are we really? And
right.
And is who we are who we want to be, or is this just like the patterns that we've fallen into because of the what we think of the expectations,
how we were schooled, yada yada. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So that I think I feel like with the LA Master Chorale, we're really leaning into that right now. And the other thing I'll say is that we've rethought the leadership of the organization as well. So that, because again, I've been doing this now 20 years, basically solo, as the artistic director of the organization. Mm-hmm. I'm really, I don't want to leave. I feel like we've got a lot of important work still to be done. I feel like our strongest work is still ahead of us, but I think it's really important that we have a wider range of artistic viewpoints, and that we can be more responsive as a team than as an individual. So what that means is that Jenny Wong, who has been our associate conductor for the last 4 years, fabulously talented. Oh my God. Jenny is originally from Hong Kong, and I met her when she was doing her doctoral work at USC a few years back, and she's just been a godsend for the ensemble, and she's so much more than just a conductor to us. And so we've created a new position of associate artistic director, which Jenny assumed in July. And then Reena Esmail, who is this amazing composer based here in Los Angeles, who just started as composer in residence with Seattle Symphony. And she's been working, her whole story is so crazy and inspiring. Her heritage, of course, is Indian. I think, I'm trying to remember, I'll get it wrong and I'll feel terrible, but either one of her parents is Hindu and the other is Muslim, but in their heritage, she was actually raised Catholic and actually went to the same church growing up that Paul Solomonovich, full circle, was the music director of. Anyways, Reena went to Juilliard as a pianist and Yale as a composer. In LA now, she's been working very intensively with an organization called Street Symphony, which is founded by Vijay Gupta, which is an orchestra of people experiencing homelessness in the Skid Row community in Los Angeles. And Reena's been working with them, and also a group called Urban Voices, which is also based in Skid Row. And so she brings this incredible range of experience and perspective to us. So Reena is now our artist in residence. And so with Reena, Jenny and myself, and then Gene Davidson, who's our president and CEO, and Gene came to us from the Silk Road Ensemble. And then through working with Bill T. Jones and New York Live Arts. So she also has this just great perspective. So I feel like we really are in a position now to be much more responsive to all of the communities that make up Los Angeles. In LA, like Vancouver, is a super complex place, and again, I think that taking advantage of this fermata in time is allowing us to really just again look at who we are. Is that who we want to be? And if not, if there's a gap there, how are we going to get closer to who we want to be and who we aspire to be? And so in that sense, it's weird that I feel like super energized and really, really inspired and fired up right now. And it's because of this partnership with these great artists that we're
I
working
was just going to say, you sound so utterly giddy about it. And it also speaks, I think, a little bit to what you were saying before of maybe what the old school conductor visualized. Well, I'll say himself as, because that was typically the
with.
case,
Duh.
as the sole genius. Only the good things come out of this mind versus trying to bring these coalitions of voices together. Yes, it needs some deciding needs to happen, and certainly we can facilitate in those ways. But when your values of as a personal artist, I think, are codified, and you know yourself, and then you're a part of an organization with whom you share those values, boy, you can translate that communication of what is important to us, what are we actually trying to accomplish here, what's the outcome that we're trying to have, much more effectively than if you're worried about, are people going to think I'm a fraud or whatever. And it's getting over that part of, I think, sometimes ourselves as
Getting out
choral
of your head.
leaders.
Yeah.
I think it's a really hard thing to do.
You
Can be a lifetime's work.
Yeah,
What's that?
You hinted at something a moment ago, Eric, which I think speaks to the idea of establishing and maintaining trust, not only with your singers but also with all of your constituents, with your audience, with your supporters, with the family of your organization. And I know that that's something that's been a real value for you. And it's a matter of just truth telling. First off, I mean, being trying to be as clear about who you are, and also clear about what the experience of any given concert is going to be when you're talking about marketing.
What's
program.
What's that take? What are you leaving the hall with?
Yeah. And to not to undersell or oversell or sugarcoat. Like if you have a challenging program, to let people know, this is why we're doing it. This is why we think it's important. This is what we are bringing to it, and these are the things that we hope that our audience will take away from it as well, and this is why we believe in this music so strongly. But I don't know. It's a subject that I find fascinating, because I think we've all seen, especially performing arts organizations, that will take risks, but then the marketing side of the organization is so risk averse, and the PR side of things, that there can be this huge disconnect.
Absolutely. You've sold a concert that everyone thinks is going to be, pretty chords all in a row, and right. And that's not what they signed up for, and that's not fair to their time. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I want to turn a little bit. This is extraordinary context for what I want to ask here is about. You've really defined like the why you're going to be creating the next generation of projects with LA Master Chorale. But then the question for me is how and with whom? You're just coming off of you just released a brand new album that was a large project. An hour long of music is never a small project. But how does this work with you for creating commissions, creating the projects? How are you bringing folks into this? Where does the audience come into that? Where are you seeing the needs in terms of maybe the repertoire, but also your community, your audience, your singers? All of those constituencies need to be considered that's what they pay us the big bucks for too. When we are trying to say, okay, this is going to be the thing we're going to try to bring into the world. How do those projects come about? Because you've done some just fabulous ones and varied ones over the years. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, programming is just the best thing, right? I mean, it's like, don't you feel like it's, you're like an executive chef, like planning these
bounty
banquets,
of ingredients, yeah.
Right?
Truffles, yes.
That's right, but not too much.
Not too much.
Indigestion. But it's, putting together a season is really, it's super fun because, you're really kind of, you're curating, obviously, like these pieces that hopefully you yourself love and believe in, and composers that you love and believe in for new works. With us, it's at the Master Chorale in Los Angeles. It's always been and continues to be a matter of finding the right balance in any given season, because I think, as I may have mentioned earlier, we're kind of like a one-stop shop for choral music in LA. So it's like nothing is off limits, and we're known both as a large symphonic organization and as an organization, I think, that takes chances, and of course we do a lot of commissioning. So it's always a matter of kind of finding that balance. I feel very lucky to be in Los Angeles these days because one of the things that we've been leaning into for the last 5 or 6 years is to really lift up Los Angeles-based artists and particularly Los Angeles-based composers. And so we started an initiative called Made in LA 5 or 6 years ago. And so I say we're lucky to be in LA because there's such a great and an eclectic group of musical creators here. So, right now we're working on a big project with Billy Childs, who a lot of people know is like one of the great jazz pianists in the world today. But Billy actually studied with Morton Lauritsen when he was at SC, and has always had this like deep love of choral music. So we've commissioned in the past already a couple of pieces from Billy, and now he's writing a big new work for us, which would have been premiered next year, but of course everything is being pushed back by a year. Reena Esmail, who I mentioned earlier, is our artist in residence, also creating a large scale work that's based on her study of Hindustani traditions. And she went back to India and spent quite a bit of time learning the different vocal techniques and the kinds of vocal rags, and she's become really immersed in that, and the Indian and Pakistani community here in Los Angeles. So she's bringing that to our works, and it's great with Reena because she's a great singer herself, so she can come into our rehearsals and just demonstrate to us, and this amazing kind of flexibility that the Hindustani traditions of vocalizing that you just cannot notate. I mean, it'd just be nothing but like crazy.
Nor would you and I be able to teach it, by no means. Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes years and a lifetime of work. Yeah.
So it's been great to be able to lean into the talent pool in Los Angeles. And I mean, I have to say, in in the Master Chorale itself, we have Sean Kirchner and Matthew Brown in the tenor section, who are both like amazing composers. And I mean, there's no lack of like interesting voices to work with in LA, and I think that so that's the more that we're able to again kind of lift up these creative voices, the more that we're able to have meaningful interaction with the different communities that make up Los Angeles, and I'm proud of the fact that the chorale itself also more and more looks like Los Angeles. It's just that the representation within the group is becoming much more pronounced, and that's I think that's just building upon the work and the reputation of the group. We're not where I'd like to see us yet, but we're definitely on the way there, and that's just it's another thing that's just so important, and I think it's another area that we have an advantage in the choral world over our orchestral brethren, because it's anybody can sing. Everybody has access to this little bit of cartilage in here. You don't have to invest in 20 years of bassoon lessons and build double reeds.
Yes, we come built with our reeds. Yeah,
exactly. So it's all a way of saying we do have a bit of a leg up, just in terms of providing access. I mean, that said, the music education situation in California is pretty abysmal right now, and specifically in Southern California. I mean, we really celebrate the high school and elementary school music teachers who have been able to, like salmon, swimming upstream, have been able to foster and nurture these programs, but they're pretty few and far between. So one of the things that we're in the planning stages now of with the LA Master Chorale is to create a youth choir initiative that with the goal of creating access for every young person in Los Angeles to sing in a group together, because it's the lack of access, of course, that leads to the lack of representation in professional ensembles, whether they're orchestral or choral. And so again, I think that at least as singers, it's easier for us to build these programs and to lean in, of course, to all of the traditions. Whether it's the Black church traditions or the traditions of Latin America, which are so incredibly varied and represented in Los Angeles, or the Hindustani. LA is, again, it's like Vancouver. It's a melting pot, and it's very exciting and also very challenging to have so many different communities that make up the tapestry of the city, and to find ways to have meaningful relationships with as many communities as possible. So I don't even know what the question was anymore.
It doesn't matter.
It was a long answer.
It doesn't matter. What does matter is that in the midst of, a lot of really awful things that I continue to see and read about, this gives me a great deal of hope. And I just want to thank you for the work that you do and the spirit in which you do it, because it really does matter. It really does matter. And folks like me and folks like hopefully that are watching this, if we can just glean a little bit of that energy, that enthusiasm, and that level of inclusivity, you have done us a great service today. So I want to thank you so much for joining me and speaking so beautifully.
Eric, thanks so much. Yeah, I'm very, very inspired by your work. As well. You. So it's mutual admiration society.
When I can finally get down across the border, believe me, I'm going to come sit in a couple rehearsals.
Yeah,
but not yet.
If they'll let anybody from California into BC.
You're great,
Yes,
but you're not worth 14 days in quarantine, okay? I'm not going to.
for real.
Thank you, Grant.
Absolutely, Eric. Thanks. Cheers.